Hey up! Right, today I'm going to show you the Royal Enfield Sump Guard for the new Classic 350 and 350 Meteor, along with some guidance on how to fit it. But first of all, after Wednesday's videos on Hitchcock's adjustable levers for these bikes, in fact it was quite late on in the evening, I got a message from Hitchcock's asking me to express their apologies. Due to some IT glitch, their whole website crashed, which left a lot of customers a bit frustrated because they were unable to place their orders. They did get the site up and running again later in the day, but they've asked me just to let people know that it is all fixed now. And also something pointed out by viewers in the comments section is that Hitchcocks don't just supply these levers for the new 350s, they have an entire range which are designed to fit most Royal Enfield models, including bikes like the Interceptor 650 and the Himalayan. So I'll leave a link to their entire sort of lever webpage for those of you that would like to have a look at them. Along, of course, with a link to the Sump Guard that I'm going to show you today. Now, I was surprised to find when I unpacked this Sump Guard that there were no instructions with it. I mean, it's not rocket science, I worked it out. But then later found out that Royal Enfield are now sort of gradually transitioning over to paperless instructions, which apparently can be accessed via a QR code on the box, which I completely missed and threw away. But if anyone's using this video as a how-to guide on how to fit them, I will find the link to Royal Enfield's instructions, and again, I'll leave them in the video description for this video. A Sump Guard, in my opinion, is a must-have for any road-going motorcycle. It protects your bike from damage caused by flying road debris and dirt, which over time can make quite a mess of the lower half of your bike. As usual, Royal Enfield have come up with a very reasonably priced but extremely well-made solution for their new 350 Classic and Meteor models. Now, I'm going to guess because I didn't actually measure the thickness of the aluminium that this plate has been pressed from, but I would sort of guesstimate it's about 2mm thick. It's substantially understated in design, I think, compared to the older one that I fitted to the Mule a year or so ago. It's perhaps a bit plainer and not as in your face as the old version. It has 3 strengthening ribs pressed into the middle of the Sump Guard, and as you can see, all the edges bar the rearmost part have been rolled or turned over to add additional strengthening to the whole sort of assembly. This gives the whole Sump Guard an amazing torsional strength and rigidity that you don't get with a flat plate. And I think this, combined with a very strong mounting method, will mean that this plate will take a lot of punishment. As you can see, Royal Enfield have drilled a series of 3 drain holes to get rid of unwanted liquids. I know that this particular Sump Guard probably isn't going to be to everyone's taste, but it's the one I've got, it's the one I've fitted. It is, as they say, what it is. Let's get started. Now, you will find in your kit 4 rubber grommets. These can be a bit of a twat knacker to fit. They need to be pressed into each of the eyelets, front and rear, on the Sump Guard. I think the idea of these is to cut down on obtrusive resonance which might result if the sump plate was bolted directly onto the bike without any form of isolation. It's a thoughtful touch that ensures a better user experience. Make sure that they're seated correctly and evenly, and then we can have a look at the bike to see where this Sump Guard is actually going to be attached. Now, in the past, people have suggested to ease the fitting of this sort of component that I should use some sort of grease to make them easier to fit. My experience in doing that is that it also makes them sort of prone to coming out when you don't want them to. So I would recommend that you just persevere and fit them dry. At the end of the day, this entire assembly process from start to finish, fitted to your bike and ready to ride. Doesn't take any more than 20 or 30 minutes. Now, in your kit you will find 2 metal brackets for attachment, a long bracket with holes at each end for attachment, and a shorter bracket with slots in it for attachment. The short bracket is the rear attachment point, and it's the most difficult part of the job. At the rearmost bottom part of the engine, there is a bolt that holds the engine onto the frame. Now, you can't actually withdraw this bolt completely, not without dismantling half of the bike and risk the displacement of the engine. So Royal Enfield have designed that shorter bracket with open-ended fixings on it, so you can simply loosen this bolt and then slide the bracket onto it and then tighten it back up again. It's the most sensible way of doing it, but unfortunately because of its positioning I was unable to get a camera angle on it. In fact, I couldn't even video the bolt or nut from the other side because it's not visible. It's one of those tasks that you have to do blind by trial and error. You need to get a spanner on both ends and then loosen the thread off until there's just enough room to get your bracket into place, or slide your bracket into place. You will probably find this a little bit easier than I did, because obviously if I tried to get a sort of line of sight on it, it meant that my head was in the way of the camera, so I had to keep my head out of the way all the time. But once you've got it in place, you can go ahead, tighten the fasteners back up, ensuring that the bracket itself stays sort of pointing downwards, with the threaded holes pointing downwards. It's important that I mention that because when you tighten the nut back up, it does have a tendency to sort of spin round at an odd angle. And of course you want those captive threads on the lower part of the bracket to be pointing downwards, ready to accept the plate. I've got to admit, this part of the job did try my patience a little bit, but just try to be patient, take your time with it, because once you've got this in place, the rest of this job is all plain sailing. It's dead easy. So it should look something like this once you've got everything fastened back up. And when you've done that, it's time to move on to the front bracket fixing. At the front lower end of the engine, the lower engine cradle is attached to the engine via one long bolt. This needs to be removed completely to fit the front bracket on. Now, don't worry, there's plenty holding the engine in place. There's no danger with the engine slipping when you remove this, or there shouldn't be. Just release those fasteners and then pull the main bolt out. You can then put the front fixing bracket in place and reinsert the bolt. Once you've done that, replace the locking nut and fasten it on, but don't tighten it up. Leave that bracket sort of loose if you like. You need a bit of jiggle room for fitting the actual sump plate on. Now, turning your attention back to the sump plate, in your kit you'll find 4 top hat spacers. These need to be inserted into the grommets from the outside, as you see here, at both ends of the sump guard. You're then ready to attempt installation. Now, with all sump guards, when it comes to fitting them for the first time, that fitting essentially sets position of the fixing brackets, so there's always a bit of jiggling about involved to get everything to line up. Once you've done it for the first time and then tightened everything up, it's an easy job to remove the sump guard when you need to in the future and refit it. Using the stainless steel Allen screws supplied with the kit, first of all, loosely fasten the front of the sump plate in place onto the bracket. It's all going to feel very loose and ungainly at this stage, but don't worry about that. Once you've got the threads engaged properly, fully tighten those fasteners up onto the bracket, but still leave the bracket loose on the frame at this stage. And when you've done that, the sump guard will hang there quite safely while you turn your attention to the rearward fasteners using the remaining 2 stainless steel Allen screws, which you should insert and tighten up fully to the rear bracket. Once you've done this, you will have effectively set the correct angle for that front bracket, so you can now go back and tighten up the frame bolt that holds that bracket in place. And that, as they say, is all there is to it. Like I say, for your average mechanically minded person, this should only take half an hour at the most. It always takes me a lot longer because I have to give the camera the best angle to show you how everything works, which usually leaves me sort of groping in the dark a bit. Once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so helping to support this channel. I really do appreciate it. I would also appreciate it if you've enjoyed this video and found it useful, that you would leave a like and perhaps consider subscribing to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. It's completely free and you can unsubscribe at any stage. I will of course be back next week, so until then, please ride safely and I'll see you soon.